a nurse, multiple infant deaths, and several guilty verdicts. But is the truth as clear-cut as the headlines lead us to believe? The Lucy Letby case is simply a labyrinth of unanswered questions and a constant reminder of the fragility of life. Could it be that the Lucy Letby conviction was simply a web of circumstantial evidence, or a case proven beyond reasonable doubt? The Letby case is more than just a verdict. It's a crucible of questions about guilt, innocence, and the systems entrusted to save our lives. To help us navigate this complex situation, we'll delve into three key aspects of the case, empowering you, the viewer, to make your own informed decision. First, we're going to have a look at courtroom procedure, because by examining the legal framework that governs this case, we can gain valuable insights into the factors that may have influenced the verdict in the Lucy Letby trial. Then, we're going to look at two contrasting cases involving child E and child K. In child E's case, the prosecution relied heavily on circumstantial evidence and expert testimony, while in the second case, the evidence was much more compelling. And finally, we're going to look at missed signs. Why were these alleged crimes not caught sooner? Before delving any deeper, I want to acknowledge the profound tragedy of these infant deaths. The pain of losing a child is unimaginable, and my thoughts are with you, the parents. I would also like to correct an error that I made in my last video. Lucy Letby is currently in the Bronzefield prison, not Low Newton High Security Prison for Women in Durham, as I previously reported. And thank you to the viewer who brought that to my attention. We'll start this section with a summary of what happens in the court, and then move on to the more substantive matters relating to the Letby trial. Firstly, the jury. Now, they decide on the facts presented by the prosecution. The question before them was, did Lucy Letby harm the infants in a way that caused their death? For example, did she tamper with child F's feeding bag? The prosecution has the burden to prove Lucy Letby's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt using the information at hand. The defence, on the other hand, they challenge the prosecution's case and present evidence to defeat the allegations made by the prosecution. The defence ensures that Lucy Letby's rights are protected. Now, the judge, and critically, decides on the legal matters, not matters of fact. That's the jury's job. The judge guides the jury in interpreting the evidence and also the facts, and ensures a fair trial for the defendant. Justice Gosch, in this case, instructed the jury that they could convict Lucy Letby even without pinpointing the exact harmful act. And this is the exact quote from Justice Gosch. In other words, the jury was permitted to use evidence in the same way as if the evidence had a really strong link to the act or the murders in this case. We'll hear a little later on about the consequences of another case where someone was convicted on circumstantial evidence and years later was completely exonerated of the crime. Lucy Letby's lawyers, of course, argued that the judge's direction in this case was simply wrong in law. Letby's defence team, of course, also challenged her convictions through an appeals process. This led to a hearing before 3 judges at the Court of Appeal in London, and I think this BBC article sums up the appeals process nicely. Criminal appeals are not simply a second bite of the cherry. The only way Letby would be allowed to appeal against her conviction was if she could show that the judge in her original trial had made a legal mistake or an error in law, or if there was new evidence, had it been available at the time, might have led the jury to different verdicts. The appeal was interesting in itself because the defence team claimed that the convictions against Letby were unsafe. They called into question the science behind the prosecution's case and the expert witnesses that were called, and more on that later on. Moreover, Ben Myers KC, representing Letby, argued for a dismissal given that the court had received an email alleging that someone had overheard a juror claim that the jury had already made up their mind from the very beginning of the trial. The judge spoke to the juror concerned and permitted him to continue serving. But Lucy Letby's lawyer argued that the judge should have questioned the person themselves who made the allegation. While these details aren't directly related to the specific accusations against Lucy Letby, they offer a glimpse into the internal workings of a courtroom trial. With that aside, let's take a closer look at the circumstances surrounding the death of Child E. Child E, along with his twin brother, were born 7 weeks prematurely and weighed less than 1.4 kg, or 3 pounds. Both infants were in a critical condition within the neonatal unit. The prosecution's case here hinged on the allegation that Lucy Letby injected air into his bloodstream, causing an embolus. Air embolisms are dangerous and happen when air bubbles enter a blood vessel, subsequently blocking the blood flow, and this can prove fatal if left untreated. The prosecution here relied heavily on the research by Dr. Sue Lee, a Toronto neonatologist, to establish the dangers of air embolisms in newborns. Dr. Lee co-authored a 1989 paper on this topic, which formed the basis for expert testimony presented in the case. Interestingly, Dr. Lee himself was not called as a witness. Instead, other medical experts gave their testimony based on the knowledge of Dr. Lee's research. During the trial, the prosecution placed a lot of emphasis on the skin colour of the infants, which they argued was symptomatic of an ear embolism. Unfortunately, nobody checked with Dr. Lee about what the skin colour would have been if the baby suffered an ear embolism, because very specific skin discoloration was diagnostic of an ear embolism, and none of the babies in this case had displayed this exactly, meaning it's unlikely that Dr. Lee would have said that these babies suffered an ear embolism. There's also another piece of missing evidence, and that's a post-mortem examination. Without a post-mortem, definitively determining the cause of Child E's death is difficult, and the lack of one raises serious questions about the conviction. Firstly, the importance of having a post-mortem examination is crucial for establishing a cause of death. They can also reveal an underlying medical condition that was not previously known about. For example, a rare disease, as one of our viewers pointed out in my last video. They can also give closure to grieving families, but it's equally important to respect a family's wishes. The decision to perform a post-mortem is a sensitive one, and the emotional state of the parents does need to be considered. In this case, the doctor, while acting with good intentions to spare the parents of further grief, decided not to request a post-mortem. The senior consultant in this case suspected that Child E had died of a suspected severe intestinal disorder known as necrotizing enterocolitis. The consultant now says that she said the baby was deemed at high risk of a variety of complications, and a post-mortem examination was not arranged, but she now felt that she did not give enough weight to the fact that the infant's x-rays had been normal and the infant had been largely stable before his collapse. The lack of a post-mortem and the problematic expert testimony creates significant complexities and an uncertainty in this case. If you recall that Justice Gosh instructed the jury that they could find Lucy Letby guilty even if they weren't sure of the precise harmful act. Perhaps he did this because the evidence in this instance was largely circumstantial. A viewer raised about the Kathleen Folby case in Australia. Folby was convicted of the murder of her 4 children despite a lack of physical evidence like suffocation marks. The evidence she was convicted on was purely circumstantial. In a similar vein, in the Letby case, Justice Gosh, in his remarks to the jury, said that it was a case in which the prosecution substantially but not wholly relied on circumstantial evidence. In the Folby case, a lot was made of the various notes she wrote after the deaths of her children, and these were later exposed as a potential bias where a grieving mother's words were misinterpreted by the jury. Similarly, there was much emphasis placed on the handwritten notes by Letby. I think what the Freiberg case did was to expose a potential bias in the legal system where the expression of a grieving mother was scrutinised in a way that led to misinterpretations and a subsequent wrongful conviction. Kathleen Freiberg was fully exonerated of the murders of her children. I think the case of child E exposes troubling aspects of the Letby conviction. The lack of a post-mortem examination, the questions around expert testimony raises significant doubts. This, along with comparisons to the Kathleen Freiberg case, highlights the potential dangers of relying too heavily on circumstantial evidence, particularly where a grieving parent's words or observations are involved. The unanswered questions surrounding child E's death underscores the need for more thorough investigation and potentially raises concerns about the validity of Letby's conviction in this instance. However, the murder of child E is in direct contrast to child K, and that's what we're going to look at next. It's unclear as to why the first jury did not reach a verdict on this particular case. Not all court documents are readily available, and sometimes legal arguments or procedural errors can lead to a mistrial. This may not reflect the strength of the evidence itself, but rather is a technical hurdle. The specific case here would have been particularly challenging for Letby's defence team to convince the jury of her innocence, and this is why. Firstly, baby K was born extremely premature at just 26 weeks gestation on the February the 17th, 2016. Baby K was born at 2:12 a.m. and was tubed to assist breathing. Baby K was extremely fragile and needed continual monitoring and specialised care. However, there was a change in care at around 3:30 because the assigned nurse left baby K briefly to speak with the parents. She was obviously comfortable with the baby's condition at the time, and so she left Lucy Letby to look after the baby. Upon returning at 3:47, the assigned nurse found baby K being treated by Dr. Ravi Jaraman, a neonatal consultant. In evidence, Ravi Jaraman told the court he was increasingly concerned about Letby and the spike in deaths in the neonatal unit. He told the court that he realised that Letby was on her own and he checked on baby K to assure himself everything was fine. When Dr. Jaraman entered the neonatal unit at 3:45, he told the court that he found Letby next to baby K's cot. He realised straight away that the baby's condition was rapidly deteriorating and that Letby would have also seen the baby desaturate. In other words, the baby's oxygen levels were decreasing. According to Dr. Jaraman, Letby did nothing to assess the baby, nor did she raise any alarms or call for assistance, as would normally happen in these situations. It was later established that baby K's breathing tube was dislodged, and this caused her not to get the support that she needed from the ventilator. There are two Latin maxims. The first is mens rea, or guilty mind, and then there's actus rea, or the guilty act. Here there are 4 guilty acts. The first was dislodging the breathing tube. The second is the inaction or not doing something to prevent child K from desaturating. The third, according to the prosecution, is the dislodging of the breathing tube a second and third time. And the evidence says that Letby was present during these occurrences. Sadly, child K died a short time later after being transferred to the Arrow Park Hospital. Unlike the case of child E, Lucy Letby's conviction for baby K on the evidence is strong. In other words, there is a strong evidential link between the acts done by Letby and the death of baby E. So how did Letby get away with murder for so long? That's what we're going to look at next. Well, there are indications that doctors flagged problems very early on, but their concerns were repeatedly dismissed by senior management at the counties of Chester Hospital. While confronting these issues might be difficult, inaction can have devastating consequences, and in this case, the alleged crimes and subsequent cover-ups have significantly harmed patients, staff morale, and the NHS's reputation. In response to the public outcry that followed the guilty verdicts, the government upgraded the initial inquiry into a full statutory inquiry with powers to compel witness testimony. This underscores the need for a thorough investigation to understand how the system failed and to ensure that such tragedies never happen again. The Letby case highlights some of the deeper challenges facing the NHS. A report released in 2023 by the Health Foundation identified several key issues, and these issues need urgent attention to ensure the NHS can continue delivering quality care. I think the Letby case serves as a stark reminder of the importance of transparency, accountability, and prioritising patient safety within the healthcare system. And with that said, the UK now has a new government, and let's hope that the NHS is made a priority. The Letby case raises a multitude of complex questions about guilt, innocence, and the healthcare system itself. While some aspects of the case, like the death of child K, presents a much more compelling argument for Letby's guilt, others, like child E, leave significant room for doubt. The lack of a post-mortem examination and the reliance on circumstantial evidence raises concerns about the Letby convictions. The case of Kathleen Froby, where a grieving mother's words were misinterpreted, highlights the dangers of this approach. With child K, Letby's presence during the dislodging of the breathing tube and her inaction paints a clear picture of her potential role in the baby's deterioration and subsequent death. However, I think the case exposes the failures within the healthcare system, where reported concerns were allegedly dismissed. The government's upgraded inquiry is a step towards understanding these issues and preventing further tragedies in the future. The Letby case serves as a stark reminder of the importance of thorough investigations, of prioritising patient safety and ensuring transparency within the healthcare system. While the justice system has delivered its verdict, the lingering questions around child E's death underscores the need for a more complete picture. Thank you for joining us as we explored the Lucy Letby case. Like and subscribe for more in-depth videos like this, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with my latest content. Until next time, take care.